So what are your obligations? So Matt, if you don't mind just clicking through them one by one, and let's talk to each one in turn. So your obligation is to determine the status of each assignment, right? So for each role that you've got in place. You've got to use reasonable care in making a determination, and I'll touch on that in more detail in just a moment. You've got to pass the determination statement to each party in the contractual chain, right? So you've got to pass it through to, if you're using an MSP, to the MSP, if you're just using Gravitas directly, passing it straight to Gravitas, and then it's our responsibility to pass it further down the chain. You've got to include the reasons for the determination. This is kind of one of the reasons why the CES tool has created some issues in the past. So what does reasonable care mean? And this is really important. So just remember, your responsibility as a client is taking reasonable care to make the status determinations and to take reasonable care in making those status determinations. So what does this mean? Well, the people making the decision need to be qualified and understand the rules. So you coming on a session like this, you've ticked the box. Somebody comes and audits you in 4 years' time and go, well, you know, I went on these sessions here, including this Gravitas session, you know, I've covered it off. Now, the larger the company, the more reasonable care you should be taking, right? You need to consider all the facts and speak to different teams internally and also the contractor directly or through a recruiter. Now, this is important. So what we saw last year was that a lot of people who were maybe the project managers on a project might have said to everyone, you know what, I will make the determination for this. And it's kind of, I think I want it to be outside, so it's outside. And I'm going to change the rules to make it work. What generally happened with those is that for the more complex organizations, HR or finance came along and said, okay, well, all those determinations you made before, they all wash away. We need to follow a different approach here, and we need to follow this route to make sure we comply. Okay. So speaking around and actually making a policy, and we'd recommend for businesses which are large or kind of from the larger side of medium to really get an IR35 steering committee set up amongst yourselves, and we'd be happy to input into that process and take you through the lessons we've learned. So we do recommend the use of the HMRC CES tool. Okay, so that's available for everyone to use. It sometimes doesn't provide you with a determination at the end, but we do recommend that you add to it. You look at it and you take a look whether it's inside, outside, or whether it's got no determination. But you've also got to look at the exactly what I mentioned before, that who's completing that, and is there a conflict of interest within them. Also, the CES tool is based on a very mathematical calculation. It's biased towards people being inside rather than outside, and whether you're employed or whether you've got a business-to-business relationship, i.e. inside or outside, isn't necessarily that form of mathematical calculation. It's a judgment which gets taken, and the judgments are made in court, and it's effectively a 51% determination. Are you a business, a self-employed, or are you an employee? Right? That's how case law works on these things. And you've got to keep adequate records for the decisions, and you've got to communicate that decision. So you've got to keep records on site for each determination you've made. Now, this again is uncomfortable. Quite often, contractors in certain roles can work through. They don't pass the HR desk sometimes, right? So sometimes they pass straight through that, and they go straight through procurement teams. They're off payroll, so people don't get to see it within there. And you're actually trying to get your procurement teams, etc., to make sure that all of this is handled in a way where the records are managed, they're kept for a period of at least 7 years, and everything's covered. This is kind of a finance or HR task, right? You need to have the right people involved to get the right governance over it. And once you've made a decision, it's important to know that decision doesn't last forever, right? So if you've made a decision that somebody's outside, and it really kind of, we're looking at the outside decisions here. If you've made a decision that somebody is outside, generally, it's because they're delivering a project. There's a specific piece of work or deliverable that they're providing for you. And what quite often happens, and we see it all the time, is that somebody's hired for a certain role, but they're really good, and then they stay on site. It might not just be for 6 months. It might not just be a year. It can sometimes be 3, 4, 5, 6 years that they're staying on site as a contractor. And I promise you that over a period of time, that will probably move away and probably become much more business as usual. So periodically, and we'll be, if you're working with a company like Gravitas, it would make sure that you're on target with that we're reminding you of your obligations in there and asking you for a refresh at that point in time.